When I first played Galaga in the arcades back when I was a kid, I instantly became addicted. Released by Namco in 1983, it was the second game in the Galaxian series. I loved the use of colour, the multicolored sprites, how silky smooth it played with many different enemy sprites and bullets on the screen, the tractor beam, the challenging stages. It was and still is one of my favourite games ever. Like fine wine, this game has aged magnificently. Galaga was the game that made me a fan of shoot-em-ups or shmups. Fast forward 30 years later, with 2 arcade machines in my game room, the influence that this game has on me is unquestionable. But back in the 80s, as a teenager, I had a Commodore 64, and I desperately wanted a version of Galaga I could play at home. The C64 seemed more than capable of a machine to pull it off, but it just never happened. Unfortunately, there wasn't anything close to the arcade original. So, if we're talking about ports of Galaga to the Commodore 64, there's 3 of them that stand out for me, and all 3 of them unfortunately aren't very good. The first one is the official port of Galaga to the Commodore 64. Now, while the enemy patterns and the movements are actually pretty good, as you can see, the game is completely running in PETSCII or ASCII characters, and in some ways it's a quite interesting port of the game, but when you really compare it to the original, obviously it doesn't come across very well. Now, the next port of the game is Zalaga with a Z or a Z. Now, Zalaga is a better port than the official port of the game, but it's still not very good. It's based on a game on the BBC Micro and BBC Electron called Zalaga, and this is the port of that game. Now, the BBC version actually runs pretty well. The C64 version, unfortunately, runs fairly poorly. As you can see, because there's so many different things going on the screen, it's struggling to keep up. There's certainly not anything resembling smooth scrolling or anything like that going on in this game. Now, the third port is by Kingsoft, and it's called Galaxy. And this is probably the most faithful port of Galaga on the C64, but it's still not very good. It has all the bits that make Galaga what it is, but as you can see, it doesn't translate very well to the Commodore 64. When the Amiga came out, Deluxe Galaga scratched the itch, but by that time, the C64 was becoming a distant memory. I had always wondered why we never saw a good port of the game until now. Now in 2017, developer Jason Aldred has released Galencia for the Commodore 64. The best way to describe this game is that it's a love letter to the original Galaga game. So as a fan of the C64 and a big supporter of Homebrew, I picked up a copy. Will it finally fill that void? Let's check it out. Galencia was developed over a 6-month period. It has 50 stages, impressive graphics, challenging stages, boss battles, tractor beams, 6 separate SID tunes, and will be instantly familiar to anyone who's played Galaga before. The game is available by Protovision Online. I'll leave a link in the description below on where you can pick it up from. Just a note, however, that this is not a sponsored video. When I heard about the game, I picked it up on my dime. There are different versions of the game that you can pick up, including a cassette version, disc, and cartridge. I opted for the cartridge version for ease of use, which comes with quite a few goodies, including a manual, stickers, a coffee coaster I think, a key ring, and the cartridge, all in this impressive box that looks very nice in my big box collection. Both PAL and NTSC C64s are supported and work fine. For this review, I'm going to use my North American C128D, and plugging in a joystick to port 2, let's jump into the fray. Immediately you will notice how impressive the levels are. While it's not an exact replica of Galaga, the main sprite is almost identical. The enemies are very familiar too, but they have their own movement routines, and if you're going to clear all 50 stages of this game, you need to forget about the ship movement in Galaga and learn the patterns in this game. You start with 3 ships, and there is a single fire button to shoot. You have 69 seconds each stage to clear the round. Whatever time limit is left is your bonus. This siren enemy can throw down a tractor beam which can capture your ship. Just like in Galaga, this will display the legendary fighter captured text and will give you a chance at double ships and double shots. If you notice on the bottom right of the screen, there is a very familiar ranking icon that resembles the military ranking found in Galaga. As you clear more levels, there will be different enemies. So far my best round is level 25, so I am still a long way off the pace in order to beat the game. Every few rounds there is a flying skull round with 2 protective barriers that are put in your way. These barriers will slow down your progress from clearing a round. They can be destroyed but require many shots. Remember, you have a time limit on each round, so your first order of business should always be to remove these barriers first. In rounds 5, 15, 35 and 45 are bonus stages. Just like in Galaga, a no miss will mean a bonus, usually an extra life or a double ship. There is another type of challenge round where you need to collect stars that are in an asteroid field. Each star is worth 10,000 points, and every 10,000 points in the game, you will receive an extra life. So there's definitely a risk versus reward curve on this level. Going in for a few more extra lives means you may lose a few in the process trying to collect a few more of the difficultly placed stars. At the end of the game, just like in Galaga, there is a summary of how well you did and your ranking. If you were good enough, you can put up your initials on the high score table. You can even save your high scores to cartridge. This is a very cool feature. I can't say I've ever seen a C64 cartridge in the past with save support. Very nice touch. Tapping the F1 key will display an options menu. You have the ability to adjust the star field to be monochrome, dual color, or multicolor. In some instances, I found that I couldn't track bullets with multicolor too easily, so I changed to monochrome, which in my opinion is much better. You can also adjust the color palette of the scoreboard, save, load, and reset high scores, turn music on and off, select tournament mode, and change the difficulty of the game from between easy, normal, and professional. Starting in easy mode will give you double firepower and double ships immediately, and it's a good way to learn the stages, the enemy movements, and their bullet patterns. Because you can save scores, I was curious about the internals of the cartridge, so of course I opened it up to take a look. There's definitely a lot going on here, and it's interesting to note that individual computers are a well-known developer of Amiga hardware, so I'm not quite sure if they are just providing the motherboards for the cartridge version or they were involved in this release. Either way, this is pretty cool. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this review of Galencia on the Commodore 64. It finally fills that void that I've been looking for all those years with a really good Galaga port on the C64 that was never something that ever existed back in the day. So I'm very happy to see it now. Check out this game, pick it up, it's fantastic. You can pick it up on cartridge, on floppy disk, and I believe there's also a cassette version you can get. I do have more C64 Homebrew games to review that will be coming up in future videos, so stay tuned for that. Now before I go, I did want to mention this book. This is Retro Game Dev by Derek Morris. I met Derek Morris at the Commodore Retro Expo during the middle of last year in Las Vegas. Derek is a developer with over 20 years of experience in the industry. He's worked at Codemasters, Sega, Natural Motion, WayForward Technologies. He's been involved in many popular games, many of the games that you've probably played in the past. He's ended up writing his own book called Retro Game Dev, and this is a guide to writing assembly language games and programs on the Commodore 64. And as you can see on the back there, you can write your own space shooter and you can write your own platform game. It really goes through all the things that you need to set up a development environment on a Windows PC or a Mac PC, I believe, and talks about how to write games using assembly language on the C64. This is something that I've always been interested in myself, but I've never really known where to start. With so many different tools and assemblers and cross compilers and things out there, it's very difficult to know where to start with some of this stuff, but this book really walks you through how to set up a development environment and how to get up and running pretty quickly. So I'm going to do another full review of this book once I've completely read through it and sat down and put it through its paces. In other words, I'm going to go ahead and write a couple of programs based on the information that I've read in this book. So stay tuned for that. And then once I've done that, then I will come back and really give you my take on what I think about this book. All right, guys, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching this video. It's the first one of 2018. We've got so many things planned for this year, so stick around. As always, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now.